The crunch of gravel beneath my tires sent a chill down my spine. Something was wrong. My silver SUV rounded the final bend of Pine Haven's winding country road, revealing the land that had been in my family for generations. But it was no longer my farm. Instead of the golden wheat field swaying in the summer breeze, a 3-story concrete monstrosity loomed before me, its reflective windows gleaming like 1,000 watchful eyes. My hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. The farm I had grown up on, the land I had worked, loved, and fought to protect, was gone. Where my grandfather, Samuel Walker, once tilled the soil with his bare hands, there now stood a luxury hotel. Manicured lawns stretched where wildflowers used to bloom. A massive parking lot sprawled across what had once been rich, fertile land. Bright yellow construction barriers wrapped around the property, while workers in hard hats bustled about like busy ants. My heart pounded. How could this happen? I had only been gone for a month, a crucial consulting job in Singapore that my family desperately needed. Sarah and I had locked everything down, secured every document, every legal right. Or so we thought. A construction worker noticed my SUV idling at the roadside and walked toward me, clipboard in hand. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. I forced my legs to move, stepping out of the car, though they felt like rubber. "This is my family's land," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm Jordan Walker." The worker's face paled slightly. "Oh. You're the owner." He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. Before I could demand an explanation, my phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Jordan, emergency. Call me now." But I couldn't look away from the monstrosity rising from what used to be my farmland. Each step I took toward it felt like a violation, my boots crunching on the soil that had fed my family for 4 generations. Then I saw it. A massive sign near the construction entrance, bold and proud, Willow Ridge Community Development. Approved by HOA Board. And below it, in sharp, authoritative lettering, Project Director, Karen Whitmore. My jaw tightened as the pieces clicked into place. Karen Whitmore, the self-important president of Willow Ridge HOA, had always seen my farm as an inconvenience. The same woman who had sent endless letters about grass height, fence regulations, and neighborhood aesthetics. She had fought me for years. Now, she had taken what she had no right to claim. A stack of papers lay on a nearby table: permits, zoning approvals, official stamps. Each page was a piece of a puzzle that had been assembled behind my back. Rage and disbelief burned in my chest. What had she done? And, more importantly, how could I fight back? The words on the construction permit felt wrong, not illegal, perhaps, but carefully calculated. The language was precise, the phrasing just vague enough to slip past most eyes. A loophole. That was Karen Whitmore's specialty, finding ways to take what wasn't hers without leaving a trail. The construction worker shifted nervously. "Sir, you can't be here," he said again, but his voice lacked conviction. He didn't stop me from looking, didn't call for security. I turned to him, offering a thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'll be leaving soon." But as I drove away, my mind raced. How long had this been in the works? What legal gymnastics had Karen pulled off to make this happen? And most importantly, how could I prove it was wrong? My phone buzzed again, Sarah's message still sat unanswered on my screen. But I needed to get my head straight first. I needed information. A billboard caught my eye as I passed through town: Willow Ridge, growing together. I let out a bitter laugh. Growing together, huh? Apparently, that meant taking without asking. I pulled into a local coffee shop, ordering black coffee and grabbing a notebook from my glove box. Time to start piecing this puzzle together. Dates, approval stamps, meeting minutes, names of officials. I jotted down everything I could remember, mapping out a web of connections. This seat taken? I looked up. The waitress held a fresh pot of coffee, eyes filled with curiosity. "Rough day?" she asked. I hesitated, then let out a slow breath, my grip tightening around my pen. "Not rough," I said, a determined smile forming. "Just getting started." The old file cabinet in my barn had sat untouched for years. But today, dust be damned, I was going to find something Karen hadn't accounted for. Sunlight filtered through the wooden slats, catching the dust as I pulled out a stack of yellowed documents my grandfather had carefully preserved. My fingers traced the edges of old property maps, legal agreements, faded letters. Each one was a thread in a decades-old story of ownership, struggle, and resilience. One document stood out, a hand-drawn property map from 1952. The intricate pencil lines marked every boundary, notes scribbled in the margins in my grandfather's handwriting. I could still hear his voice, "Knowledge is your best weapon, Jordan. Never let them take that from you." As I examined the pages, a pattern emerged. Karen hadn't built her empire overnight. The HOA had been chipping away at property rights for years. Then, a faded yellow envelope caught my eye. Inside, a series of letters detailed a land dispute from decades ago, one that looked suspiciously similar to mine. I wasn't the first person Karen tried to steal land from. But I would be the last. The property dispute from decades ago wasn't just similar, it was identical. The same tactics, the same legal loopholes, the same excuse of community development. But someone had stopped them before. And now, buried in these old documents, were the answers to how. I pulled out my phone and began snapping photographs, making sure to capture every detail, every faded signature, every zoning law reference, every handwritten note. These weren't just relics of the past anymore, they were evidence. Weapons. Sarah would help me sort through them later. She had a knack for seeing connections I sometimes missed. But right now, I had to focus. A sudden noise outside made me freeze, the crunch of gravel. Someone was coming. I shoved the documents back into the file cabinet, my heart pounding, and moved to the barn's small window. Peeking through a gap in the wooden slats, I saw a white SUV roll to a stop near my property line. The HOA parking sticker gleamed under the sun. Then she stepped out, Karen Whitmore. Her designer sunglasses reflected the midday light as she surveyed the land like a queen inspecting her kingdom. Even from a distance, I could see her clipboard clutched in perfectly manicured hands. She took her time making notes, her gaze sweeping across my land as if she already owned it. She didn't know I was watching. Her expensive heels sank slightly into the soft ground, the same soil where my grandfather had once grown wheat, where my family had toiled for generations. Behind her, the concrete beast of the hotel loomed, completely out of place in this rural town. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my lawyer, found something interesting. Call me ASAP. I clenched my jaw. Karen wanted me to react, wanted me to storm outside, yell, do something rash. Anything she could twist into me being hostile or unreasonable. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I waited, watching as she scribbled notes, snapped a few photos, then returned to her SUV, driving away in a cloud of dust. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain, just enough to keep my head clear. This land no longer felt like home. It felt like a battlefield. I turned, gripping the files tightly. Somewhere in these documents was the key to stopping Karen, to exposing Willow Ridge HOA's corruption. I looked back at the hotel rising in the distance. They thought they'd won. But they had no idea what was coming. The double doors creaked open, and I stepped inside. My leather briefcase felt heavier than ever, filled with stacks of meticulously organized documents. Each page was a weapon in the fight for my family's land. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the packed room. The air was thick with tension. HOA board members sat stiffly in their seats, their eyes flicking toward me. Curious residents filled the chairs behind them, murmuring among themselves. They had come to watch the show. At the head of the long wooden table, Karen Whitmore sat like a queen overseeing her court. Her perfectly pressed blazer and carefully styled blonde hair exuded control. But I saw the tightness in her jaw, the slight clench of her fingers against the table's edge. She knew I wasn't here to roll over and accept her theft. I set my briefcase down, unlatched it, and slowly pulled out the first set of documents, old property maps dating back to my grandfather's time. "I'd like to discuss the recent development on my family's farmland," I said, my voice steady, controlled. The room fell silent. Whispers died instantly, replaced by an almost electric tension. I spread out the maps, each one notarized, meticulously preserved. The lines were clear, the boundaries were undeniable. These maps, I continued, my fingers tracing the faded ink, show that the land where the hotel now stands was never legally transferable without my explicit consent. A tiny twitch in Karen's eyebrow, barely noticeable, but I caught it. She knew she was sitting on shaky ground. I pulled out photographs. Time-stamped images showing the farm's continuous maintenance, crop rotations, family activity, land use over the years. Each photo was another nail in the HOA's coffin. In the back row, a middle-aged woman leaned forward, Martha Thompson, a longtime resident, fair-minded and sharp. I saw her expression shift as she scanned the documents, from curiosity to concern. Karen tried to cut in. "Mr. Walker, this is hardly. I'm not finished." My tone was firm, but I didn't raise my voice. Years of legal consulting had taught me the power of a measured response. Some board members shifted in their seats, suddenly uncomfortable. Then I revealed my trump card, a detailed environmental impact assessment. "The hotel," I said, laying the report on the table, "has drainage issues that could contaminate local water sources. The soil disruption alone violates county environmental guidelines." Silence. Then a single hand went up, Martha's. "Can you explain the environmental risk?" she asked. Karen's face paled. She knew this was far from over. I walked Martha through the technical details, breaking down complex environmental concepts into plain language. This wasn't about confusing people with legal jargon, it was about making them understand what had been done to them. The room was silent except for the sound of my voice. They were listening. Truly listening. Across the table, Karen Whitmore's carefully constructed facade was cracking. Her lips were tight, her nails drummed impatiently against the polished wood. Anger. Fear. Desperation. She knew I wasn't just challenging the hotel's construction, I was exposing a pattern of systematic overreach. "You can't just take land," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "This isn't just about a hotel. This is about property rights. About family legacy. About community trust." A young board member, Justin, leaned forward. I recognized him from previous meetings, one of the few who didn't blindly follow Karen's lead. "We have some questions about the documentation," he said, his voice thoughtful. I almost smiled. Questions meant they were listening. Questions meant they were doubting. For the next hour, I methodically dismantled the HOA's case. Each document, each photograph of my family working the land, each legal reference proving they had no right to take it. The tone of the meeting shifted. Board members who had looked dismissive now seemed uneasy. Martha was taking notes. Justin was flipping through the environmental reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. The only person who remained silent was Karen. The confident queen of Willow Ridge HOA now looked like someone trying to hold onto a crumbling throne. By the time I finished, the air was electric. I hadn't won, not yet. But I had planted doubt. And doubt would spread like wildfire. As the board members and residents filed out, Martha stopped beside me. "Those environmental reports are serious," she whispered. I don't think the board fully understood what was happening. I nodded, gathering my documents. The real battle was just beginning. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as I stepped into the parking lot. I saw her. Karen stood near her SUV, arms crossed, watching me. Her eyes burned with a mix of hatred and fear. She knew I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The next morning, a knock at my door interrupted breakfast. I opened it to find Mr. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, holding a weathered manila envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed it across the kitchen counter. "You'll want to see this," he said, his voice heavy with decades-old secrets. Inside were faded photographs, handwritten notes, old property records, and with them, a truth I never expected. Karen Whitmore hadn't just targeted my farm. She had been stealing land for years. Sarah's hand rested on my shoulder, grounding me as I spread the documents across the kitchen table. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice calm, steady. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "These aren't just old papers. They're a roadmap to Karen's entire strategy." Across the table, Mr. Henderson settled into a chair, his eyes distant, as if he were seeing ghosts from the past. "She's been doing this for years," he murmured. "Nobody ever had the courage to stand up to her before." I picked up the first photograph, an aerial shot of Pine Haven from the late 90s. Red boundary lines had been carefully drawn onto the map, but something was off. The lines didn't match the official county records I'd studied. Mr. Henderson sighed. "I remember when she first became HOA president. Said she wanted to improve the community. But better for who?" Sarah, ever meticulous, began making copies of the documents. Each page was a piece of evidence, each photograph, a potential weapon in our legal arsenal. Then I noticed movement outside. A young woman walked past our window, pausing just long enough for me to recognize her. I'd seen her at HOA meetings. She hesitated, glancing toward our house, then quickened her pace. "Who was that?" I asked. Sarah had noticed too, her brow furrowed. "I don't know." But she looked nervous. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Some folks in the community have been talking. Not everyone supports Karen's plans. But people are scared. She has a way of making life difficult for those who speak out." I carefully mapped out the connections. Each document told the same story, a pattern of calculated manipulation, property rezoning, subtle boundary changes, mysterious permit approvals. Karen had been playing a long game. And my farm was just her latest target. "We need to be careful," I told Sarah. "These documents are powerful, but if we rush this, she'll find a way to discredit everything." The phone rang. Sarah answered, keeping her voice neutral. The conversation was brief and cryptic. When she hung up, her expression had changed. "Someone wants to meet you," she said. "Someone who knows more about Karen's past projects." Mr. Henderson let out a soft chuckle. "Seems like the truth has a way of finding its way out." I organized the documents, sealing them in protective sleeves. Years of meticulous record-keeping were about to pay off. Karen thought she could take what she wanted without consequence. But she had no idea what was coming. Through the window, a car crept past the house. In the passenger seat, the same young woman stared at our home, watching, waiting. But for what? Sarah squeezed my hand. "We're in this together," she said. I nodded, staring at the documents spread before me. They weren't just papers. They were proof. Proof of a systematic grab. Proof that Karen Whitmore thought she was above the law. But more importantly, proof that we were going to fight back. As Mr. Henderson stood to leave, he paused by the door. "Sometimes," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "the quietest people have the loudest stories." And with that, he was gone. A single document slipped from his jacket as he walked out, fluttering to the floor. I picked it up, my pulse quickening. Another piece of the puzzle. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, organizing the stacks of old maps, property deeds, and county records. A maze of information was coming together, forming what I hoped would be an airtight case. Across from me, Marcus Callahan, my lawyer, adjusted his reading glasses, his sharp eyes scanning a survey map from the 1960s. "These property lines," he muttered, tracing a finger across the paper, "are more complicated than I first thought." His voice carried a mix of excitement and concentration that made me feel, for the first time, truly hopeful. I remembered all the times Karen had looked down on my family. Sneering at us in community meetings, mocking our outdated farming methods and inefficient land use. Her perfectly pressed suits and manicured nails had always contrasted sharply with my calloused hands and weathered boots. But today, those hands would become weapons of justice. Sarah brought us fresh coffee, setting a box of old records on the table. "I found these in my grandmother's things," she said. Marcus's eyes widened as he flipped through the yellowed documents. These, he muttered, could be game changers. As the afternoon sun faded, casting long shadows across the room, the weight of what we were uncovering settled over us. Karen thought she could steal our land, build her hotel, erase our legacy. But she had no idea what was coming. Then the phone rang. Marcus checked the caller ID and smiled. "County Records Office," he said. "They found something in the archives." I turned toward the window, my eyes locked on the land Karen had tried to steal. The fields where my family had worked for generations held a secret, a legal defense stronger than any concrete hotel could ever.